July 23rd, we've seen that what we said has actually happened in reality. In other words, said and done. Yesterday, we said that the price would gain a bit of strength around the 65,000 area, and then it would move forward with this last push up to the final zone at 68,000. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We've seen the forecast over all these months, this accumulation zone in the long term that carries over to the 4-hour chart, which is where we are now, 4 hours on Bitcoin, and we're seeing that swing from 68 to 60 over and over again. Now we're on the last ride. There was some doubt yesterday about whether this could be it, this area near 68, which reached 67, very close to 67, this high it hit yesterday, whether it could be part of this last move around 68,000. That possibility was there. We were saying that it could be option A and option B. In other words, option B would be that this was already the high and it would start heading towards 60, or option A, which was the one we were leaning toward, which was to gain strength around 65 and go for one last high, just a bit above 67. That is still option A in the forecast for the week. I'm Michael Vasquez. This is Daily Bitcoin Analysis, and as always, we're going to look for the forecast of Bitcoin's price movement. After 15 years in professional trading, I tell you that the only thing that works is to stop looking at indicators, stop making things too complicated, and see why the price moves. And the price moves because there are institutions and big players manipulating it. Period. That's all there is to it. What you need to look for are signals, because it's like a creature, a very strong, very big entity that whenever it shows up has to leave a footprint, has to leave a trace. What we do is look for those traces, follow them, and then, yes, enter by following those tracks, those clues, and win like the institutions do, because they're the ones who end up making money at the end of the month. We don't want to be retail traders who lose. We want to be institutions that win. All right. After this introduction, we're going to clarify the forecast we just made for the week, because you already know that we look for those clues to make our predictions. The most fundamental, most important clues are volume. Simple volume is where you'll find those traces I mentioned from the institutions. Simple volume and then price action. Because price action, which includes support, resistance, and the shapes of Japanese candlesticks, gives us those movements that go along with the volume. All right, it's very important to understand the Wyckoff phase you're in. You don't really need to make things too complicated with Wyckoff or other somewhat complex terms. In my course, I explain them to you from scratch until you understand them the way I do. But what Wyckoff tells us is that it makes sense. There's a zone where the strong hands, the entities I mentioned, accumulate. Then there's a quick move where they distribute, and then another move where they repeat that cycle over and over again. In other words, they make money all the time. And in any time frame, we can see that zone of, for example, distribution, markdown, accumulation, markup, distribution, markdown. We always see it. It's clearer the bigger the time frame is. Usually, not always, but usually those Wyckoff movements or phases are easier to spot. For example, right now we set it to each month, each candle is a week, and the phases I'm telling you about are there. In this last one we're in, it's an accumulation phase. I told you when it started. Normally, an accumulation always starts with a very significant pause called a selling climax, and that's exactly what we saw. The selling climax that showed up here about a month and a half ago, that selling climax appeared. I told you it could be the start of the accumulation, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Right now, we're in the upper area of that accumulation, and as long as it doesn't break through that 68,000 zone to enter a markup, we'll understand that the price has to go back to 60,000 after approaching those 68. That's clear to us, and now it helps to reduce the time frame to see what it's doing in the long term. If you're investing in Bitcoin, it's clear that what we're waiting for is a markup, and in a few months, we'll have Bitcoin close to 80. I even think that the 90 zone is more suitable for making a distribution in the long term. But anyway, we'll talk about that as the clues for that time frame start to show up. Now, what interests us, of course, is this smaller 4-hour time frame, which is for making forecasts, which is what we focus on in this channel, and it's for about a week or so. Very well. Yesterday, we saw how it was going to approach the 65 zone to gain strength. That's exactly what it's doing, and now it's starting to try to surpass that previous high. Unless we see now at 3:30, which is a pretty key time when New York opens, that we see a push downward with significant volume of 1.5 billion, which is where you can spot the footprints of the big players. Let me show you the volume again. See? These spikes are the footprints of the big players. See? Here we have one, another, and another. Usually a spike appears and then about 6, 7, even 10 smaller candles, which is normal. What the big players try to do is make significant moves on the price, and in the following candles, the price does tend to make that move that the big players intended with the candle. For example, when we see here a very long wick, basically a hammer, a significant volume starts and it's signaling an upward move. It could happen in the next candle, but usually the move just builds up. It signals it to us, and in 4 or 5 candles, we start to see it. We can't know at first what the duration will be, but since we have the long-term set, we know that the upper limit is 68,000 and the lower limit is 60,000. Very good. I haven't mentioned it to you, but I always tell you that it's very important to keep the price action chart in mind. We've seen it in the long term, and in the 4-hour chart, it's the same. It's 60,000 on the bottom, 68,000 on the top, and the middle of the channel, which is 64,000. That's also very important because when it reaches that area, it has those types of reactions where we look for the volume to see what the next step is. We already have the forecast set for the medium term, for the week, which is to make a new high above these 67,000, unless significant volume appears and signals option B, which we were saying would mean this was the absolute high, and now it's going to look for 60,000. But for now, what we're looking for is a level above 67,000 for this week. That doesn't mean it's going to happen today, because many times when we look at the chart and see signs that something is about to happen, we think it's going to show up in the next hour, in 2 hours. No, the chart, it has its own timing, and we have to adapt to the chart. The best way to adapt, according to your trading style, this would be swing trading, when we're talking about several days, even a week. And then there's where you can make the most money, which is in intraday or scalping. I do this type of investment, this type of trading, intraday or scalping, and I post my 2 entries. I share them in a VIP Telegram, and I'll leave a link in the description in case you want to join. There are 100 spots available for now. We're still far from reaching that number, but you're welcome to join. The best way to do scalping on 15-minute charts, for example, or 30-minute charts, is to use those. They're the most recommended time frames. You should look for your own support and resistance levels, just like I explained in my course, in this time frame. Of course, 60, 64, and 68 have an impact on scalping. But today, it probably won't even reach 64, for example, or 68. We have to look for other support and resistance levels that are typical for this time frame. For example, in this area, around 60, 6,500, we have an important resistance. Below, we also have another one at this low at 65,300, and we have to keep looking to see how the volume reacts as it gets closer. There are 3 important elements to keep in mind. The shape of the Japanese candlesticks, always looking for rejection wicks or even dojis or shooting stars. Volume, which is the most important one. We always look for simple volume to see if those pushes match up with the movement. For example, here in the morning, we saw significant volume, which matched the spread of the candle, but then a wick appeared, along with the volume and the arrival at this area I mentioned before, around 65,300. Out of the 3 elements, there were 2 very clear ones that could give us some bullish movement, and that's exactly what we've seen this morning. Now I'm going to show you. We've already gone over the forecast. We've covered the best elements, or how to enter scalping or intraday trading. I'm going to show you yesterday's challenge, the July challenge, the trade I took yesterday. I started on July 1st with $500 on mex.com. It's super simple. I'm always going with the flow of the movement. I get in and take 15, 20, 25. Now I'm going to take 30 because the account is already growing quite a bit. And if not, the movements from when they're sent to the market until they're executed, I could lose a few dollars there. That's why I set it to 30. Very good. See? I set leverage to 10 and the take profit to 25. Today, for the next one I do, I'll set it to 30. When the take profit is executed, MEXC sends me a TP, an email telling me that it has been executed and I've earned the corresponding amount. Very good. I'm going to show you the account so you can see how much it's at today, which is $904. I started with 500. I've basically doubled it without any trouble in less than a month. Let's see how much I end up with on the last day of July. Whatever I win, for example, if I win $500 or $600, I'll raffle it among everyone who signs up on MXC and makes their first deposit. No, there aren't many this month, so the chances are actually pretty good. Plus, MXC gives you $50 with your first deposit. People in the community usually get gifts, bonuses, money basically. So it's really interesting. I'm Michael Vasquez, and this is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. Thank you so much for watching this video. And as I always say, this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing my experience with you after more than 15 years in professional trading. See you tomorrow.